Vivian Langston Ashford, you are under arrest for federal wire fraud, real estate fraud, and 17 counts of deed forgery spanning 3 states. The FBI agent's voice cut through the Texas morning like a blade through silk. 6 black SUVs lined the street. Blue and red lights painted the manicured lawns of Silver Pine Estates in alternating flashes. A helicopter circled overhead, its rotors beating a rhythm that matched my pulse. "This is my community!" the woman in handcuffs screamed, her platinum blonde hair falling loose from its perfect bun. "I've run this HOA for 19 years. You can't do this to me!" Click. The handcuffs locked into place. "That ranch," I said, my voice calm despite everything churning inside me, "was never yours to sell." Vivian Langston Ashford turned to face me. Her light blue suit, usually pristine, was wrinkled. Her Gucci sunglasses hung crooked on her face. Her eyes, once filled with the cold confidence of absolute power, now burned with something closer to disbelief. "You," she hissed, "you're just a cowboy, a nobody." I tipped my hat back, letting the morning sun catch the badge on my leather jacket. Federal Land Investigator. The words gleamed like a promise kept. "You forgot one thing, Vivian. Cowboys recognize snakes when they see them." 3 weeks earlier, I sat in a leather chair that smelled like old money and older secrets. The law office of Henderson and Associates occupied the 3rd floor of a limestone building in downtown Austin, the kind of place where fortunes were made and unmade with the stroke of a pen. My hands rested on my knees, the calluses rough against the worn denim. The scar running along my right wrist caught the light from the window, a pale reminder of 12 years working with wild horses in Montana. Rope burns never fully fade. Neither do the lessons they teach you about patience, timing, and knowing when to hold on. The attorney across from me was named Horace Henderson, 72 years old, wire-rimmed glasses, and a handshake that suggested he'd spent his youth doing something more physical than pushing papers. He slid a folder across the mahogany desk with the reverence of a man handling something precious. "Mr. Shepard Kane," he said, "your great-uncle Ezra left you the Crosswind Ranch, 427 acres, unencumbered title since 1891. I opened the folder. The first page was a cadastral map, the property lines drawn in red ink that had faded to the color of dried blood. The boundary wrapped around the land like a protective embrace, and I noticed immediately what made this inheritance unusual. The Crosswind Ranch sat completely outside the boundaries of any homeowners association. It was an island of independence in a sea of suburban development. "There's a problem," Henderson said, his voice dropping to a register that made me lean forward. "Someone's been using your land." "Using it how?" He removed his glasses and polished them with a cloth from his pocket. A stalling technique. Whatever he was about to say, he didn't want to be the one saying it. "The HOA adjacent to your property, Silver Pine Estates, appears to have incorporated your uncle's ranch into their common areas. They've built structures. They're selling lots." He paused. 12 lots, to be precise, starting at $1.2 million each. The drive from Austin to Silver Pine took 3 hours. 3 hours of flat Texas highway, oil derricks nodding like tired sentinels, and a sky so blue it hurt to look at directly. My Ford F-250 ate up the miles while my mind chewed on questions that had no easy answers. Uncle Ezra had been a quiet man, a rancher's rancher, the type who measured wealth in sunrises and good fence lines rather than bank statements. He'd never married, never had children, and had spent the last decade of his life as something of a recluse. When he died 8 months ago, I'd been the only family member who attended the funeral. Standing alone in that cemetery, watching the casket lower into the red Texas dirt. I'd made a silent promise to honor whatever legacy he'd left behind. I hadn't expected that legacy to be stolen before I could claim it. The entrance to Crosswind Ranch announced itself with a rusted iron gate hanging between two granite pillars. The stone was old, weathered by 130 years of Texas seasons, and carved into the surface were words that made my throat tighten. Kane, 1891. But someone had mounted a new sign directly over my family's name. Bright white plastic, corporate font, aggressive as a slap. Silver Pine Estates. Common area. Authorized personnel only. I stepped out of the truck and felt the heat rise from the gravel like a physical force. The land stretched before me, rolling hills of yellow grass, punctuated by clusters of live oak trees. In the distance, I could see a new stable. Its red paint still fresh, 6 thoroughbred horses grazed in a paddock that hadn't existed when Uncle Ezra was alive. And the farmhouse, the 3-story wooden structure that my great-great-grandfather had built with his own hands, now sported a real estate sign that made my blood pressure spike. For sale, Silver Pine luxury lots, starting $1.2 million. What in the world? I muttered, pulling out my phone to photograph everything. The sound of engines behind me cut short my documentation. 2 white SUVs with HOA patrol emblazoned on their doors roared up the access road and skidded to a stop, blocking my exit. 4 men in matching polo shirts stepped out, their expressions suggesting they'd been waiting for exactly this confrontation. But it was the woman who emerged from the lead vehicle who commanded attention. Vivian Langston Ashford looked like she'd stepped out of a magazine spread for aggressive real estate moguls. Light blue suit, perfectly tailored. Gucci sunglasses pushed up into platinum blonde hair, styled in a severe bun. Manicured nails painted the exact red of warning signs. She carried a clipboard like a weapon and walked with the confidence of someone who had never been told no. "You're trespassing on HOA common property," she announced, her voice cutting through the afternoon heat like a blade through butter. I held up the deed Henderson had given me. "Ma'am, this is my land, inherited legally, never part of any HOA." She laughed. Not a pleasant sound. It was the laugh of someone who viewed other people as obstacles rather than individuals. "Honey," she said, stepping closer and tapping one red fingernail against the hood of my truck. "I've sold 12 luxury lots on this land of yours. Collected $4.8 million in deposits. The buyers move in next month." "You sold my land?" "Our land. It was donated to the HOA in 2019. I have the paperwork." "My uncle died in 2022. He never donated anything." Vivian's smile didn't waver. She pulled out her phone and dialed a number from memory. "Sheriff Morrison?" "Yes, it's Vivian. I have a trespasser at the Crosswind lot, possibly armed, cowboy type." She looked me up and down with theatrical concern. "Please send units immediately." She ended the call and slipped the phone back into her pocket. "You have 5 minutes to leave before you're arrested on my property." I could have argued, could have stood my ground and waited for the sheriff to arrive. But 12 years in federal law enforcement had taught me something valuable. Never engage an enemy until you understand their full capabilities. "Let me give you some free advice, cowboy," Vivian said as I climbed back into my truck. Her voice dripped with the kind of sweetness that precedes poison. "In this county, I don't just run the HOA. I am the HOA. And what the HOA wants, the HOA gets." I drove away, but not because I was afraid. I drove away because I needed to make a phone call. The number I dialed hadn't been used in 3 years. 3 years of retirement, of training horses, and pretending that my old life was behind me. But some skills never rust, and some credentials never expire. Federal Land Investigation Division, how may I direct your call? Extension 742, tell them Shepard Kane needs a favor. The motel room smelled like disinfectant and broken dreams. I sat on the bed with my laptop open, logging into databases that most civilians didn't know existed. The kind of databases that tracked property transfers across state lines, flagged suspicious deed modifications, and connected dots that would otherwise remain invisible. 12 years ago, I wasn't just training wild horses in Montana. I was a federal land investigator, specializing in tracking illegal land seizures, unauthorized resource extraction, and real estate fraud schemes that crossed state boundaries. The work was dangerous. The Colorado case had proven that, when 3 of my colleagues nearly died because we'd underestimated the reach of a land-grabbing organization. I'd retired early after that, burned out, disillusioned, ready to spend my remaining years doing something that didn't involve confronting the worst of human greed. But retirement hadn't revoked my credentials, and it certainly hadn't dulled my skills. I typed Vivian Langston Ashford into the search field and waited. The results loaded slowly, each entry adding another piece to a puzzle I was only beginning to understand. 47 properties linked to her name, 3 states, 19 years of activity. Well, Vivian, you've been busy. The pattern emerged with sickening clarity as I dug deeper into the records. 2005. Vivian became president of Silver Pine Estates, HOA. The vote had been 12-11, with 1 ballot disputed and ultimately discarded. 2007. 40 acres of adjacent land donated to the HOA. The previous owner was an 89-year-old veteran who had died in 2006. No surviving family to contest the transfer. 2011. Another 120 acres acquired. The previous owner was a widow suffering from Alzheimer's, now residing in a memory care facility. She had signed the donation papers 3 months before being declared legally incompetent. 2015. 200 more acres. The original owners were too busy fighting each other over their father's estate to notice that the most valuable parcel had simply vanished from the inheritance. 2019, 427 acres, the Crosswind Ranch. Donated by Ezra Kane while he was still alive. I pulled up my uncle's medical records from that year. Houston Medical Center, admitted March through November. Stroke, right side paralysis, unable to speak, write, or sign documents. The signature date on the donation papers was August of 2019. Uncle Ezra couldn't hold a pen during that entire period. He couldn't sign his own name. He couldn't do anything. You forged a dying man's signature, Vivian. Big mistake. The next morning, I drove to Magnolia Pines Assisted Living, a sprawling facility on the outskirts of the county seat. The building was nicer than I expected. All warm colors and artificial cheerfulness, designed to mask the reality of what happened within its walls. People came here to fade away. Opal Whitfield was 84 years old, confined to a wheelchair, and possessed eyes that had seen too much loss to be surprised by anything anymore. When I found her in the sunroom, she was holding a black and white photograph with trembling hands. A man stood in front of a barn, his smile wide and genuine. "My grandfather," she said without looking up, as if she'd been expecting someone to ask. "He built that barn in 1923, with his own hands. Every nail, every board." I sat down across from her. "Mrs. Whitfield, my name is Shepard Kane. I'm investigating some property irregularities in the county." I understand you used to own a farm near Silver Pine Estates. Her laugh was bitter, sharp-edged. Used to. That's one way to put it. What happened? She finally looked at me. Her eyes were the color of faded denim, but there was steel beneath the surface. They told me I signed it over. A donation to the HOA for community purposes. She shook her head slowly. But I don't remember signing anything. One day, my farm was just gone. How did it happen? She came with cookies, smiled a lot, asked me to sign some neighborhood safety papers, said it was to protect us from developers moving into the area. The bitterness in her voice deepened. She was the developer. Vivian Langston Ashford? Opal's hand tightened on the photograph. That woman took everything my family built for 100 years, and she smiled while doing it. Smiled like she was doing me a favor. Mrs. Whitfield, I'm going to get your land back. She reached out and grabbed my wrist with surprising strength. Make her pay, Mr. Kane. For all of us. For everyone she's destroyed. How many others are there? More than you'd believe. More than anyone bothered to count. I left Magnolia Pines with a list of names that Opal had compiled over years of comparing notes with other residents. 12 families, all with similar stories. All with land that had mysteriously transferred to HOA ownership. All dismissed when they tried to complain because, as Opal put it, who believes old people when there's paperwork saying otherwise? The text message arrived at 10:47 p.m. Unknown number, 4 words. Parking lot, blue Camry, don't bring anyone. The bar was a roadhouse 15 miles outside of town, the kind of place where questions weren't asked and cash was preferred. I found the blue Camry in the far corner of the lot, its engine off but its occupant visible through the windshield. The man who stepped out looked like he hadn't slept in weeks. Hollow cheeks, red-rimmed eyes, clothes that suggested he'd been living in his car, but his hands were steady when he offered them for a handshake. You're the Kane guy, right? The one Vivian called the cops on? Who's asking? Warren Beckley. I was the HOA treasurer, 15 years. Was. She fired me last week. Said I asked too many questions about discrepancies in the financial records. We stood in the darkness, the only light coming from a flickering neon sign advertising a beer brand that hadn't been brewed in decades. Warren kept glancing over his shoulder, his nervousness palpable. Why contact me? I asked. Because you're the first person in 19 years who's actually pushed back. Everyone else she either bought off, scared off, or destroyed. But you. He studied my face. You didn't leave when she told you to. I don't scare easily. Warren reached into his pocket and pulled out a USB drive. He held it like it was a grenade with the pin pulled. There are 2 sets of books, the one she shows to auditors and the real one. This is the real one. He pressed it into my hand. 19 years of transactions. Shell companies registered in Delaware. Offshore accounts in the Caymans. And kickbacks. Lots of kickbacks. To whom? Judge Morrison's brother gets a cut for every foreclosure he approves. That's how she gets the properties, you understand? She doesn't just forge signatures. She arranges for legitimate-looking foreclosures on trumped-up liens, then swoops in and donates the land to the HOA before anyone can contest it. Judge Morrison. Related to Sheriff Morrison? Warren's laugh was hollow. Brothers, Earl runs the sheriff's department, Patterson runs the district court. Between them, they control everything that matters in this county. That's how Vivian's been untouchable. Or was. What changed? She got greedy. Your uncle's ranch was supposed to be the last big score. 47 properties over 19 years, nobody noticed. But 427 acres in a single grab? That's sloppy. That's the kind of thing that attracts attention. He started back toward his car, then paused. Be careful, Mr. Kane. The Morrisons don't play nice. And Vivian, she's got friends I don't even know about. This goes deeper than one HOA in one Texas county. Warren, why are you really doing this? He was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice cracked. My mother has Alzheimer's. 3 months ago, Vivian asked me to review her property documents. Said it was routine estate planning. He swallowed hard. My own mother was next on her list. That's when I knew I had to do something. The phone rang at 7:12 a.m. Unknown number, but the voice on the other end was sharp, professional, and very much not amused. Mr. Kane, this is Greer Ashworth, Lone Star Title and Escrow. I understand you're disputing ownership of the Crosswind property? I sat up in the motel bed, instantly alert. Title companies didn't make cold calls to property dispute claimants, not unless something had caught their attention. How did you get my number? County Clerk's office. I pulled your deed filing from yesterday. Papers rustled in the background. Mr. Kane, I need you to come to my office. Now. There's something you need to see. What kind of something? 2 seconds of silence. When Greer Ashworth spoke again, her voice had dropped to something approaching a whisper. The kind that turns a civil dispute into a federal crime. The offices of Lone Star Title and Escrow occupied a strip mall storefront between a dry cleaner and a Vietnamese restaurant. Inside, the chaos was organized, floor-to-ceiling file cabinets arranged with military precision, each drawer labeled in handwriting so neat it could have been typeface. Greer Ashworth matched her surroundings, 52 years old, according to the framed license on her wall. Horn-rimmed glasses that she removed and cleaned with a cloth when she was thinking. 23 years in the title examination business, which meant she'd seen every trick in the book. Her colleagues called her the Bloodhound. I understood why within minutes of meeting her. I've been examining title documents in this county for 23 years, she said, spreading papers across her desk with the care of a surgeon preparing instruments. I've caught forged signatures, backdated stamps, altered property lines, but I've never seen anything this brazen. She pointed to a notary seal in the corner of the donation document for Uncle Ezra's property. A circular stamp, official-looking, bearing a Texas Commission number. This notary seal, Texas Commission number 127845992, belongs to a man named Colton Murray. And Greer slid a second document across the desk, a report from the Texas Secretary of State's office. Colton Murray reported that seal stolen in March of 2017. He retired that same year, moved to Arizona. His commission expired in 2019. I looked at the donation document again. The signature date was August of 2019. This document was notarized 5 months after the seal was reported stolen, and 4 months after Murray's commission expired. Someone physically used a stolen notary seal to forge my uncle's signature. Greer nodded, and something like satisfaction flickered across her face. I spent last night pulling every document Vivian Langston Ashford has filed through this county in the past decade. 17 property transfers. 14 of them used Colton Murray's stolen seal. 14 felony counts. At minimum. And Mr. Kane, I've already contacted the FBI. They're very interested. I leaned back in my chair, processing. The scale of what Greer had uncovered was staggering. 19 years of fraud, and nobody had noticed because nobody had looked closely enough at the paperwork. Mrs. Ashworth, why are you helping me? This isn't your fight. Greer removed her glasses. For the first time, her professional composure cracked, revealing something raw underneath. 6 years ago, my sister lost her house. Foreclosure. The paperwork was irregular, but nobody listened to me when I raised concerns. I was too junior then, too afraid to push. She paused. The notary seal on her foreclosure documents? Colton Murray's. Filed 2 years after he reported it stolen. Your sister was one of Vivian's victims. My sister died in a shelter 18 months later, heart attack. Greer's voice didn't waver, but her eyes glistened. This is my fight too, Mr. Kane. Has been for 6 years. I just didn't have proof until you walked into that county clerk's office and filed a dispute. The knock on my motel door came at 6:14 a.m. Not a polite knock, the kind of knock that announces itself as authority before a single word is spoken. Shepard Kane? Sheriff's Department. We have a warrant. I opened the door to find Sheriff Earl Morrison filling the frame. He was a large man, gone to fat in the way that powerful people do when they stop caring about appearances. His badge gleamed, polished to a shine that suggested vanity rather than professionalism. His smile didn't reach his eyes. We received a report that you've been harassing Mrs. Langston Ashford, stalking, trespassing, criminal intimidation. I visited a nursing home and had a drink at a bar. That's not what witnesses say. He produced a folded document from his pocket. Restraining order. Effective immediately. You come within 500 feet of any HOA property, including that ranch you claim is yours, you go to county jail. That ranch is mine. I have the deed. Funny thing about deeds. Morrison's smile widened, revealing teeth that had seen too much coffee and too little dental care. Sometimes they're disputed, and until a court decides, possession belongs to the current occupant. That's Mrs. Langston Ashford. He stepped closer, close enough that I could smell the bacon on his breath. Word of advice, cowboy. My brother's the judge. My cousin's the county clerk. My wife's the DA's assistant. You think you can win this fight? You think you can come into my county and make trouble for my people? I said nothing. Let him talk. Let him reveal himself. Leave town, today, before something unfortunate happens. He turned and walked back to his cruiser, leaving me holding a restraining order that might as well have been written in Vivian's own handwriting. I closed the door and looked at the document in my hands. Thanks for the roadmap, Sheriff. Now I know exactly who to take down. The FBI field office in San Antonio occupied a nondescript building that could have been an insurance company or a particularly boring law firm. The woman who met me in the lobby was neither nondescript nor boring. Special Agent Miranda Thorne had salt and pepper hair cut short for practicality, eyes that missed nothing, and a handshake that could crush walnuts. She led me to a conference room on the 3rd floor and slid a cup of coffee across the table. Shepard Kane, I remember you from the Colorado case. That was a long time ago. Some cases leave impressions. She studied my face. I thought you retired. I did, until someone tried to steal 400 acres from my dead uncle. I opened the folder I'd brought and spread its contents across the table. The USB drive from Warren. Greer's documentation of the stolen notary seals. My own timeline of 19 years of property theft. 19 years of real estate fraud. 3 states. At least 47 properties. Wire transfers crossing state lines, which makes it federal. Shell companies registered in Delaware funneling money out to a sitting judge who approves every foreclosure they need. Miranda picked up the documents one by one, her expression growing more serious with each page. This is substantial. What are you thinking? Rico. Her eyebrows rose. Rico? You're thinking organized crime? 19 years, Agent Thorne. 47 victims minimum. Judge, sheriff, bank officers, notary publics, county clerk, all on payroll or receiving kickbacks. That's not a scam. That's not a one-time fraud scheme. That's an enterprise. A criminal organization operating under the cover of a homeowners association. Miranda closed the folder and sat back in her chair. Outside the window, San Antonio sprawled in the afternoon heat, a city full of people who had no idea what was happening in the county to the north. I'll need 48 hours to get warrants. Federal judges don't like being rushed, especially when we're talking about arresting a sitting state judge. She fixed me with a look. Can you stay out of trouble until then? Define trouble. Don't make me regret giving you my direct line. The HOA meeting was scheduled for 7 p.m. on a Tuesday, 2 days after my conversation with Agent Thorne. 300 residents of Silver Pine Estates packed into the community center, a building that looked like it had been designed by committee and decorated by someone who thought beige was an exciting color choice. Vivian Langston Ashford stood at the podium, light blue suit immaculate, hair perfect, smile firmly in place. Behind her, a projection screen displayed the Silver Pine Estates logo, a stylized pine tree that probably cost someone $10,000 to design. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sure you've heard rumors about a dispute regarding the Crosswind property. Click. The slide changed to show a photograph of me, clearly taken from a security camera at an unflattering angle. I looked like a drifter, which was probably the point. This man, Shepard Kane, has been harassing our community. He claims ownership of land that was legally donated to us 7 years ago. He's been banned by court order from approaching any HOA property. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. I watched from the back of the room where I'd slipped in through a side entrance. The restraining order specified HOA property. The community center was technically county land, rented for the evening. Legal gray area, but gray was good enough. I want to assure you, Vivian continued, your investments are safe. The 12 lots at Crosswind Luxury Estates will proceed as planned. Closings begin next month. Nothing this troublemaker claims will affect your property values or your community. Scattered applause. Nervous applause. The kind that comes from people who want to believe everything is fine but aren't quite convinced. Now, are there any questions? A hand rose from the middle of the room, an older man I didn't recognize. Mrs. Langston Ashford, if the land is legally ours, why is there a federal investigation? The room went silent. Vivian's smile froze, then slowly began to crack. There is no federal investigation. That's misinformation spread by... Actually, a voice cut in from the back of the room. There is. Everyone turned. Agent Miranda Thorne stood in the doorway, FBI badge held high. Behind her, 4 more agents fanned out to cover the exits. FBI. This is a federal investigation. Mrs. Langston Ashford, you are not under arrest yet, but I strongly advise you not to leave the county. Vivian's face went white. For the first time since I'd met her, she looked uncertain, afraid. We have some questions, Miranda continued, her voice carrying through the sudden silence. For everyone. The next 48 hours moved with the precision of a military operation. Agent Thorne's team worked through the night, coordinating with federal judges in 3 states, assembling evidence packets that would withstand the scrutiny of the most skeptical grand jury. I spent those hours in a San Antonio hotel room, watching the pieces fall into place on a secure video feed that Miranda had reluctantly allowed me to access. 7 a.m. on Thursday, the raids began. Silver Pine Estates woke to the sound of helicopters and the sight of black SUVs rolling through its manicured streets like an invading army. The blue and red lights painted the McMansions in alternating flashes, a surreal light show that brought residents stumbling onto their lawns in bathrobes and confusion. Vivian's house was the first target, a 3-story colonial with white columns and a circular driveway. It looked like something from a magazine spread about suburban success. Agents swarmed the property, their FBI windbreakers bright against the morning gloom. 23 boxes of documents emerged from the house over the next 4 hours. Vivian stood on her front porch in a silk robe, watching her empire dissolve, her face a mask of disbelief that slowly crumbled into something approaching terror. Judge Patterson Morrison's chambers were raided simultaneously. The 62-year-old jurist was escorted from his office still clutching a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. His laptop, his files, his carefully maintained facade of judicial propriety, all seized in the space of an hour. The HOA headquarters fell next, a modest building that had served as Vivian's command center for 19 years. Its server room was sealed, and its computers confiscated. 2 administrative assistants were led out in tears. Their involvement still unclear, but their careers certainly over. First Community Trust, the bank that had approved every suspicious loan and facilitated every questionable transfer, lost 3 executives before noon. They exited through the back entrance, hoping to avoid the cameras that had gathered at the front. They failed. Miranda called me at 11:43 a.m. "We found it," she said, her voice carrying the particular satisfaction of an investigator who has just cracked a case wide open. "In Vivian's home safe, not just Colton Murray's seal." "How many?" 7. 7 stolen notary seals from across Texas. Different names, different commission numbers, different years. She's been collecting them for 19 years, Shepard, like trophies from a hunt. I sat down on the hotel bed, the weight of the revelation pressing against my chest. And there's more. The forensic accountants have started preliminary work on the files we seized. The scale is bigger than we thought. Much bigger. The FBI briefing room felt smaller than it had 2 days earlier, crowded now with evidence boards and stacks of documents that reached toward the ceiling. Miranda stood at the head of the conference table, a laser pointer in her hand and exhaustion written across her features. 47 properties total, not 12, 47, spanning Texas, Oklahoma, and New Mexico. The number hung in the air, obscene in its magnitude. 47 families, I said. Most victims are deceased or incapacitated. Vivian specifically targeted people with no close family, unclear estate situations, or cognitive decline. She would forge donation documents, backdate them, register the land under HOA ownership through her contacts at the county clerk's office, and then either sell the parcels or use them as collateral for loans that enriched her shell companies. Total value? Miranda flipped to the next slide. The number displayed made my stomach turn. $68.4 million over 19 years. That's property value plus loans plus kickbacks plus money laundered through the Delaware corporations. And nobody noticed. The Morrisons made sure nobody looked too closely. Sheriff Earl discouraged complaints, sometimes with subtle pressure, sometimes with manufactured criminal charges against anyone who pushed back too hard. Judge Patterson fast-tracked every piece of paperwork Vivian needed, dismissed every lawsuit filed against the HOA, and signed off on foreclosures that had no legitimate basis. The bank approved loans without proper verification. The county clerk certified documents without checking signatures against records. How many people were involved? Miranda consulted her notes. 14 confirmed conspirators: the sheriff, the judge, 3 bank executives, 2 county clerks spanning different administrations, 4 real estate agents who facilitated the sales, 3 attorneys who drafted the fraudulent documents and provided legal cover. A 19-year criminal enterprise. RICO was absolutely the right call. This is textbook racketeering, the kind of case they'll teach in law school for decades. Warren Beckley's testimony took 6 hours. I watched through the one-way glass as he methodically dismantled the organization he had served for 15 years. Every transaction, every kickback, every forged signature he had pretended not to see. The federal prosecutors barely had to ask questions. Warren simply talked, a dam finally breaking after years of accumulated pressure. "I watched her do this for 15 years, he said at one point, his voice cracking. "Told myself it wasn't my business, that I was just the treasurer, that the money flowing through the accounts wasn't my responsibility to question." "Why come forward now?" the prosecutor asked. Warren's hands trembled on the table. "My mother has Alzheimer's. 3 months ago, Vivian asked me to review her property documents. Said it was routine estate planning, something the HOA offered as a service to elderly residents." He paused, struggling to compose himself. "My own mother was next on her list. The woman I had worked for, defended, enabled for 15 years, was going to steal my mother's home. That's when I knew, that's when I couldn't pretend anymore. Mr. Beckley, in exchange for full cooperation, we're prepared to offer immunity." Warren looked up, and through the glass, I could swear he was looking directly at me. "I don't want immunity for myself. I want it for everyone who was too scared to talk. The secretaries who suspected something but needed their jobs. The junior clerks who processed paperwork without understanding what they were signing. Give them protection, and I'll give you Vivian's entire empire. Every name, every transaction, every secret she thought was buried." The evening before the arrest, I drove out to Crosswind Ranch. The restraining order had been vacated, a small victory in a cascade of larger ones. And for the first time in weeks, I stood on my own land without fear of handcuffs. The "for sale" sign still stood near the farmhouse, but it wouldn't be there much longer. The HOA's claim had been invalidated, the fraudulent paperwork exposed, the entire house of cards collapsing under the weight of federal scrutiny. Greer Ashworth stood beside me, her horn-rimmed glasses reflecting the orange glow of the setting sun. "My sister would have loved to see this," she said quietly. "The beginning of the end for Vivian. She's seeing it, Mrs. Ashworth, wherever she is." We stood in silence for a long moment, watching the shadows lengthen across the yellow grass. The land stretched before us, unchanged despite everything that had happened. 427 acres of Texas hill country, rolling and ancient and patient. "Why did you really come back, Mr. Kane? You could have sold this place from Montana, hired attorneys to handle the dispute, never stepped foot in Texas." I considered the question, turning it over like a stone in my hand. "When I was 12 years old, Uncle Ezra taught me to ride on this land. Right over there, past that stand of live oaks. I fell off more times than I could count, and every time he would help me back up and say the same thing." "What did he say?" "He said, 'Land isn't just dirt, Shepherd. It's memory. It's family. It's proof that we were here.' I didn't understand what he meant back then. Thought he was just being poetic." Greer nodded slowly. "And now?" "Now I understand that Vivian didn't just steal property. She erased families. She deleted memories. She made people disappear from history as surely as if she had burned every photograph and bulldozed every headstone. And now? Now we put them back. The morning of the arrest dawned clear and bright, the kind of perfect Texas day that seemed almost inappropriate given what was about to happen. 6 FBI vehicles lined up at the entrance to Silver Pine Estates. A helicopter circled overhead. News vans from 4 different stations jockeyed for position along the main road. 300 residents lined the streets, their phones held high, recording history as it unfolded in their quiet suburban community. Among them, I spotted Greer near the front, her expression unreadable behind those horn-rimmed glasses. Warren stood further back, alone, as if he wasn't sure he deserved to witness the culmination of his betrayal. Agent Thorne checked her earpiece and nodded to me. "All units in position. Target is inside the residence. You ready for this, Shepard?" "Been ready for 3 weeks." "Then let's go get her." The walk to Vivian's front door felt longer than the 100 yards it actually covered. Every step brought us closer to the end of something that had festered in this county for nearly 2 decades. Every step was a small victory for the 47 families who had been robbed, silenced, and forgotten. The door opened before we reached it. Vivian Langston Ashford stepped onto her porch, and for a moment, I barely recognized her. Gone was the immaculate light blue suit, replaced by a wrinkled nightgown. Gone was the perfect platinum bun, her hair now hanging loose and tangled around her shoulders. Her face was pale, her eyes red-rimmed, her entire bearing that of someone who had finally realized that the walls were closing in. "This is harassment!" she screamed, her voice cracking. "I'll sue every single one of you. I know the governor. I have friends in Washington." Agent Thorne stepped forward, arrest warrant in hand. "Vivian Langston Ashford, you are under arrest for federal wire fraud, real estate fraud, money laundering, RICO violations, and 17 counts of deed forgery spanning 3 states. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." "You can't do this!" Vivian stumbled backward, her composure shattering completely. "I built this community. I made Silver Pine what it is. Without me, there is no Silver Pine Estates." I stepped forward, unable to remain silent any longer. "You stole from dying people. You forged documents from a man who couldn't hold a pen. You took land that families had owned for 100 years and sold it to strangers." Vivian's eyes locked onto mine, and something in them shifted. The fear gave way to rage, pure and unfiltered. "That ranch should have been mine!" she screamed, jabbing a finger at my chest. "Ezra promised me. Years ago, before you ever showed up, he told me I could have it when he was gone. I just took what was rightfully—" She stopped mid-sentence, realization dawning across her features. The agents around us exchanged glances. Miranda smiled. "Thank you for that confession, Mrs. Langston Ashford. We recorded every word." The handcuffs clicked into place with a sound that echoed across the silent crowd. $68.4 million in fraud, Miranda announced, loud enough for the cameras to catch. 47 families victimized. Minimum sentence, 25 to 30 years in federal prison. 2 agents began leading Vivian toward the waiting SUV. She twisted in their grip, turning back to look at me one final time. "You're just a cowboy," she spat. "A nobody. You can't have won. You can't have—" I tipped my hat back, letting the morning sun illuminate the badge on my jacket. "Ma'am, I was never just a cowboy." The crowd parted as Vivian was escorted through. No one cheered. No one jeered. They simply watched in silence, 300 phones recording every step of her perp walk. the images that would play on every news channel for weeks to come. Near the front, Greer Ashworth caught my eye and nodded once. A small gesture, but it carried the weight of 6 years of waiting, 6 years of grief, 6 years of justice delayed. Justice. Finally. The dominoes fell quickly after that. Sheriff Earl Morrison was arrested before lunch, pulled from his office in handcuffs, while his deputies watched in stunned silence. The charges included corruption, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy to commit fraud. Bail was denied. Judge Patterson Morrison resigned by 3 p.m., his career destroyed, his freedom soon to follow. Federal marshals escorted him from the courthouse he had corrupted for nearly 2 decades. 3 executives at First Community Trust were indicted before the end of the week. The bank itself faced sanctions that would take years to resolve. The news coverage was relentless. Every channel, every website, every social media platform carried the story of the HOA president who had built an empire on stolen land. Pundits debated, lawyers analyzed, and somewhere in all the noise, the truth finally emerged into the light. Warren Beckley was granted full immunity and began working with victims' advocacy groups, helping other communities identify similar fraud patterns. His mother's property was returned to her family's control within a month. And the 47 families? A federal court ordered full restitution. $68.4 million, plus interest, to be distributed among everyone Vivian had robbed over 19 years. Some of the original owners had passed away, but their heirs would receive what had been stolen. Some had been displaced into poverty, but they would finally have the resources to rebuild. 3 months after the arrests, I returned to Magnolia Pines Assisted Living. The sunroom looked the same as before. Warm light filtering through clean windows. Opal Whitfield was waiting for me. Her eyes were brighter, her shoulders straighter. She looked like a woman who had finally set down a burden carried far too long. "They told me I'm getting my farm back," she said, her voice trembling. "All 120 acres. My grandfather's barn. Everything." "You deserve it, Mrs. Whitfield. It was always yours." She took my hand, her grip surprisingly strong. "You know what I'm going to do first? Put flowers on my grandfather's grave. Tell him we got it back. After all these years, we got it back." I didn't say anything. Sometimes silence speaks louder than words. The Crosswind Ranch looked different in the golden light of late afternoon. The for sale sign had been torn down, the HOA markers removed. All that remained was the original granite pillar. Kane, 1891. Warren stood beside me, holding architectural drawings. "So what's the plan for this place?" "A sanctuary, for families who lost property to fraud. A place to heal, regroup, and fight back." "That sounds right. It's what Uncle Ezra would have wanted." Some people believe power makes them untouchable, that 19 years of corruption builds an empire that can never fall. But empires built on stolen land always have cracks. All it takes is one person willing to look, one person who refuses to walk away, one person who understands that land isn't just dirt. It's memory. It's family. It's proof that we were here. I was that person in this story. But in real life, maybe next time, it will be you. If you enjoyed this fictional tale of justice served, please hit the like button and subscribe. It helps us create more stories like this. Thanks for watching.
Just sharing some good energy today. Like the video and subscribe to Red Stories.